welcome to another Total Soccer show. My name is Daryl Grove. Taylor Rockwell is still at the beach. He's still Island Taylor. Today's guest is Mike Goodman. Mike Goodman, the managing editor of StatsBomb.com, also an Everton fan, and he's here to preview Everton. So here's why you want to hear from Mike. Mike is a really good data analytics guy, but he also has an eye for watching a game. So he really marries those two things, right? Like he knows about the numbers and the stats, but he also knows how to watch a soccer game and what's going on. So you're going to get a really good preview of Marco Silva's Everton, how they play, and how new signings like Moise Kean will impact the team. This is the fourth Premier League preview so far. We already have Spurs, Chelsea, Man United previews in the feed. Coming very soon after this Everton preview, we're going to have Liverpool, we're going to have Arsenal, and we're going to have Manchester City. So keep your ears peeled for those three future shows and go back and listen to the first three if you haven't already. I really hope you're getting something out of this because we're going deep, deep, deep on every single big team in the Premier League. Okay, that's enough of my monologuing. This isn't Shakespeare. Here's a toffee-tastic Everton preview. So I am joined by Mike Goodman. Mike, welcome back to the Total Soccer Show. I believe this is your second appearance.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's good to be back.
Last time we talked XG. I now understand XG, at least as much as you explained it to me. So I'm good there for now. But I don't understand Everton Football Club. So you are here to preview Everton Football Club 2019-20.
Well, I got to tell you, I'm really good at explaining XG to people. It's like what I do for a living. I am less good at explaining what Everton are doing, but I am sure we will get into that.
I'm sure you'll be just fine. So for people, I'm sure people know you, but I want to just talk briefly about your job. You sort of handle the editorial content for StatsBomb. Is that about right?
Yeah, I'm the managing editor of StatsBomb.com, so that's our sort of our in-house media side. We do club consulting with analytics and stuff. We're we're a data company, and then I'm also the co-host of the Double Pivot podcast. But so those are my two major things, both of which are very analytics data intensive. So my sort of look on soccer is, through an analytics lens, I guess is a good way to put it.
I would recommend Double Pivot to our listeners if our listeners haven't heard of it. It's a show I really like. Good podcasts are hard to come by, so yeah, I really like it. Yeah. Mike and Mike. It's the other Mike and Mike, right?
Yeah, we're other Mike and Mike.
Here's my question for you. You're the managing editor of StatsBomb.com, and yet you let someone else write the Everton season preview. How did that decision come about? It's
true. I'm very selfless when it comes to this. Two things happened. One, I had a kid, so I was out on paternity leave.
Okay.
But the other thing is that I am perfectly happy to let all of my writers choose who they want to write about, and then I will just sort of pick up the empty spots. So I'll have my own previews coming up near the end of the cycle, but they left me Manchester City, so I'm not going to complain too much.
Oh, not too bad, not too bad. And if people haven't read it, it's by Paul Riley. I'll put a link in the show notes because I'm assuming your editorial hand has touched this Everton season preview.
Yes, it has. But my editorial hand touches all the previews, and Paul is a longtime Everton fan and stats aficionado, so he absolutely knows what he's doing.
I see.
Put together a pretty realistic look at what Everton can look at for this year going forward.
So before we talk 2019-20, I do want to ask about last season. The one question I have is, do you have an explanation for why Everton's form was so, I'm going to say, wobbly last season? It was like weird stretches of wins and losses, right? And losses to teams that Everton are definitely better than. Do you have an explanation?
It was all over the place, and I mean, I think there's like a combination of factors going on. It was quietly a very David Moyes type season in which the defense was, all things told, very good, but their form was uneven through most of the year. And then all of a sudden at the end of the year where half the league is sort of coasting to the finish line, they caught fire and played extremely well for the last 10 games or so of the season.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a Wolves fan, and I was holding on to 7th place because that might be the Europa League. And Everton were the team that was coming for us as we got into the final weeks of the season. They had me worried for a while there.
There are, I think, a handful of tactical things that were going on, and those are they're the kinds of things that are still going to need adjustment this season as we go. Specifically with who is starting where along the front line, the front four players. But I think also what just ended up sort of happening is everybody got healthy and on the same page at the same time down the stretch.
I see. Simple as that in some ways.
Yeah, sometimes it's just that easy. That Andre Gomes took a while to get going last year. Ghana, who was very important, and we'll talk about his absence, I assume, missed some time in the middle of the season, and he came back healthy. Richarlison sort of moved over to the right for the home stretch last year, where he had been starting either up front or on the left for most of the season. So there's a handful of things that sort of all came together, and the defense sort of tightened up, and everything sort of just worked.
So then my big question is, if someone was new to Everton and they'd never seen them play before, they'd never seen a Marco Silva team play before, heading into this season, how would you describe Marco Silva's tactical setup, both in terms of shape, like the literal formation, and then the style of how he likes to defend and attack? And I'm guessing this could be as in-depth as you want to go. I'll go as deep as you like.
All right, so shape-wise, it's easy. It's almost always a 4-2-3-1.
Okay.
He will occasionally play a 4-3-3 against a very good opponent, but for the most part, it is a 4-2-3-1. It is attacking in the sense that they want to get bodies forward and into the box, and they do so frequently. It is not unusual to watch this team and see the ball on the wing with 5 attackers waiting for the ball in the box. That just happens.
Am I right in thinking you get the wingers, like say Richarlison or Bernard or Walcott, will come almost central alongside the striker, and then the fullbacks will fill that space out wide?
That's right.
Yeah, and that's how you end up crowding the box, right?
And the midfielders get forward. And part of the challenge of this team is that they don't interchange in the final third very much. Everybody is looking to get into the box. Nobody is really, and this includes Gylfi Sigurdsson, who's nominally playing in the number 10 position. He's the middle of the attacking band of 3. None of them look really to create for each other. They are all relentlessly getting forward, getting shots, getting into the box, waiting for crosses. And because of that, really, Lucas Digne from left back did most of the assisting and the sort of entries into the penalty box, and was really, really important in terms of getting into space on the flank and putting the ball into the box.
Is that by accident or by design?
That's an excellent question. It's hard to say. I think if you look at Marco Silva's previous stops at Hull, at Watford, there was some of this in that his teams didn't control the midfield, but they did attack. So to that degree, it's by design. Now, if you just sort of waved a magic wand and replaced, Sigurdsson with, say, David Silva, how much does that impact what the team is doing? Probably a lot. So I think it's sort of a little from column A and a little from column B.
Okay.
But what that means is that because of the way the attack works, defending is an adventure. They play an aggressive press, right? Because they have so many bodies forward that they try to win the ball back, but it's not super effective. What was great last season is that Ghana, Idrissa Gana Gueye, would sit behind that press, and he had an unbelievably great season cleaning everything up.
Yeah. I imagine his recoveries on the radar were off the chart.
Yeah, and the sort of StatsBomb tracks pressures, right? It's just all of the defensive stats were huge, and he made everything else to the extent that it work. And Everton were a very good defensive team last year, because of that. And basically what would happen is if the press broke down, Ghana would rescue them and let them sort of regain their equilibrium in defense, and either win the ball back or slow opposition transition and allow Everton to drop behind the ball. And then that would almost become a 4-4-2 in defense with Sigurdsson pressing up alongside the striker. To sort of pressure the center backs and initiate their defending. And that's how the team worked and functioned for the most part. And it did, like we said, in stretches it worked really well. And in stretches what happened was they would struggle to attack. They would struggle to create goals. What went on in the middle of the season was they really started struggling to create goals. And so they tried to open up even more. And rather than that fixing the problem, that just made their defense worse.
So before we talk about Idrissa Gana Gueye's absence, because obviously he's left the club, I want to go one layer deeper on the pressing, if you don't mind, because I feel like we're in an era where so many teams now have a press that I like to figure out exactly how they press. Yeah. And the one I saw a Tifo Football explainer last season, so I don't know if this is still the case. But this Tifo Football explainer, you know Tifo Football, I'm assuming, right?
Oh, they're great. I love their.
They're really good, right? Essentially said that a Marco Silva press is initially the attackers, if the defenders have the ball, so they're in possession, Everton's attackers would not go to the man, but they would cut off passing lanes.
That's
right. And then they would force the ball wide, and then once it was wide, they would switch to pressuring the man to win the ball back. And that some of the breakdown might have been that that wasn't always a smoother transition, and everybody wasn't always on the same page until the end of the season came around.
So I think there's two things, right? Like, that is clearly what Everton want to do when the opposition has settled possession. So when they have the ball and they're trying to work the ball up the field. And that's right. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. It got better as the season went on. But the other part of sort of their defensive press is, okay, what happens in transition? What happens when Everton has the ball and then they lose the ball?
Right.
And in those moments, because they are so aggressive and have so many players up the field, they do use what, we sort of like a gagging press or a counter press, basically, right, where they have so many players up the field that they try to win the ball back quickly. And that was extremely mediocre in exection.
Extremely mediocre.
Yes. And I don't think they really got punished for it because of Ghana, right?
Yeah.
Because they could do that, because if that counter press got broken, as it did not infrequently, Ghana was there to mop everything up.
Right, because you would at least even if you don't win the ball back, you would unsettle them enough that then Ghana could take advantage of the slightly loose possession from the other team. That's
exactly right. And when you have a player like Ghana, you have a lot more margin for what does unsettling them enough mean, right?
Right.
It doesn't take a very misplayed pass for Ghana to be able to take advantage of that. Whereas, if you have a less accomplished defensive midfielder, things might get tricky.
So please refresh my memory. Where has Idrissa Gana Gueye gone? I can't remember who signed him, because it was PSG in January, right? But then that didn't go through.
And it was PSG again. PSG
they came back. They came back.
Yeah.
Okay.
PSG, just as an aside, added both Ghana and Herrera from Manchester United. So they have a pair of real all-action midfielders over there this year.
Wow. And Verratti's already there, right?
Yes.
All right. I might watch some PSG games this year then.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, so he's gone now, and that's you understand it if you're Everton. They got a decent amount of money for him. And he's 29. So, getting £27 million for a 29-year-old who's sort of nearing the end of, if not at the end of his prime, plus running his contract down, that makes a lot of sense. But they're going to struggle to replace what he brought, because he was great last year.
So the two major defensive midfieldish signings that I see are Fabian Delph from Manchester City, which, by the way, is a very Everton signing. That feels like to me. That feels like Phil Neville leaving Man United for Everton kind of thing.
Yeah, no, it is a very Everton signing, and not necessarily in a good way. And that, I think for whatever, they paid £9 million.
Yeah.
I think it's fine for the money. But he's 29. He's going to want minutes. You buy him to play him, and he's not going to be here in 3 years, right? So it's a very, churning money around type of a signing.
And then the other guy is Jean-Philippe Gbamin. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Jean-Philippe
Gbamin, I believe.
Gbamin, okay. He is French and Ivory Coast, right?
He did one of those. He did one of those introductory videos where he pronounced his name for everybody, and he pronounced it 3 different ways, which I just interpreted as, okay, great. There's 3 different ways I can mess up his name.
Maybe he's messing with us.
Yeah, right. But yeah, so he is a defensive midfielder / center back who signed from Mainz, and
from the Bundesliga, not from Ligue 1. It's interesting.
Yes, and there are things to like about him, but he is not the kind of player that Ghana was. He is not an all-action, rangy midfielder who can do everything defensively.
Okay.
He's somewhat more limited in mobility. he has some degree of potential. He's 23, but he does not sort of statistically pop the indicators where you look at this and say, oh, this is perhaps a future star. He pops indicators that say, oh, if you can slot him in at center back, where you have a where you can take advantage of him being a very mobile center back and not really lose anything defensively, that might be a really nice fit. But if you're playing him in a defensive midfield role, he profiles as a much more average defensive midfielder.
So we've got Gbamin, we've got Andre Gomes just signed permanently, we've got Fabian Delph, you've got Morgan Schneiderlin is still there, James McCarthy's still there.
Yeah.
Do Everton have too many central midfielders?
I mean, Everton have too many players. Period. They have, and this is
Besic is still there as well, right?
Yes. And this is the Fabian Delph issue, right? Where you sign these guys when they're and then you give them money, and McCarthy breaks down. Besic, it turns out, just isn't really good enough, and they just sort of hang around on the books forever. And like Schneiderlin, you still expect to get some production out of. He played a bunch of minutes last year. He was against good teams, you would occasionally see him and Gana start next to each other. I expect that he will play some defensive midfielder minutes this year. But other than that, just so many of these guys are just they're bets that didn't work out. Yeah. They're older players that are still sort of like that they haven't been able to move on from, that you just don't expect them to contribute, and that they do sort of like bog down the books in a very real way. And
I don't think I even mentioned Tom Davies, who I kind of like every time I see him play. Are these guys in Tom Davies' way? Shouldn't they just clear the way for Tom Davies?
I don't think it's a guarantee that Tom Davies is going to take the developmental leap and become an above average Premier League midfielder, but I think he's done enough over the years to earn the chance to do that.
Right.
And maybe he will this year. I mean, I think it's really possible that you'll see Gomes starting every day as the more, every week as the more attacking center midfielder, and that there's going to be a lot of mixing and matching over the season as Marco Silva looks for something.
So that's kind of the balance then. In the 4-2-3-1, the two are like going to be a 6 and an 8, a more defensive and a more attacking midfielder.
That's what it's been. And the things that Andre Gomes does pretty well is dribble the ball forward out of midfield and pass the ball forward out of midfield, and he does not defend particularly robustly. So the question is, can somebody like Tom Davies develop enough of a defensive game to complement that, right? Can Fabian Delph, does he, it's been a long time since we've seen him play regularly in midfield.
Yeah.
Walking out of 3 years of Pep Guardiola, does he have sort of a range of passing and defending that'll make him it's possible he'll just become a fixture in midfield. Yeah. Like, I could see that happening. Like, that's the upside of that move for this year. But it would be a different fit than Gana was. There's nobody among all these midfielders who you look at and say, okay, they're the replacement for Gana. What it is a whole bunch of guys who are imperfect in their own way, who you're hoping will do enough of the things that they are good at to make it all work.
So then the hope maybe is that the pressing from the front, say 4, is maybe better last season because they've had a whole extra year to work on it. So you don't have to rely on Gana sort of sweeping everything up. Maybe Everton get the ball in the first phase of the press.
Right. And you hope that sort of the personnel that they sort of settled on as the season went on are better than what it was last year, right? So last year, Theo Walcott played a lot in the first half of the season and not very much in the second half of the season. They were sort of struggling for a consistent striker all through last year. Sometimes Richarlison played up top. Sometimes it was Dominic Calvert-Lewin. Sometimes it was Cenk Tosun. And those guys all, again, brought different things to the table, but like Tosun didn't press at all. Calvert-Lewin is pretty good at hold-up play, was sort of game defensively, but didn't get a lot of shots. And Richarlison is better as a winger. But when they settled on Calvert-Lewin and then Bernard, Sigurdsson, and then Richarlison on the right, that sort of hit the balance from both sides. And maybe if if Moise Kean steps in, he's young and immensely talented, although without really a track record of doing anything defensively.
Yeah.
So either Marco Silva brings that out of him, or he brings so much to the table in attack that it counterbalances it anyway, or he struggles, right? Like, those are the three options, kind of.
So if people aren't aware of Moise Kean, then he's a 19-year-old Italian striker, signed from Juventus. I think it was 27.5 million euros, possibly raising to 30. So it's a pretty big signing for Everton. And especially... To me, it feels kind of like a high-profile signing, but that maybe, because I'm kind of like, I always keep an eye on the up-and-coming young players, so I can't tell if I know his name better than most people, or if he already had a sort of big profile before coming to Everton. But it's a signing to be at least excited about, right?
Yeah, sure. So, like, he's a 19-year-old who was getting minutes at Juventus last season. Like, that's really good pedigree. And those minutes were good minutes. He put up a lot of production in the minutes that he played, and also clearly didn't want to be at Juventus anymore.
Yeah. Because he wants to play, I assume, right?
I mean, part of it was he wanted to play. Part of it was he got racially abused while he was on the field, and the team did not back him up.
Yes. Bonucci. I remember Bonucci being the one who didn't choose the right words at all afterwards.
It was Bonucci who sort of both sides did, and then the manager, Max Allegri, as well. And then, Allegri is no longer at Juventus, but clearly that soured a lot, understandably.
Right.
And so he was already in the process of running down his contract, which is why the transfer fee was so reasonable. Look, this is
Isn't it crazy that we're calling 30 million euros reasonable? I'm not even disagreeing with you.
Yeah, but you look around, right? Like the prices this summer. Like Yuri Tielemans, who's a midfielder, so it's not like an apples-to-apples comparison, went to 40 million to Leicester City, and Maguire going for 80 million, 85 million to Manchester United. Like, it's
João Felix was 126 million.
Yes. I mean, it's just it is just kind of the world we live in, right? So this is now the second summer in a row after Richarlison, who was himself 40 million, that Everton have made the kind of signing you want to see. Like, if you're going to spend a lot of money, you do it on somebody who is young with a lot of potential to develop into something special, rather than spending a lot of money on somebody who is 27, 28, 29 years old. So that's great.
What do you know about Moise Kean in terms of his sort of playing profile? Like, what does his StatsBomb radar look like?
Yeah, so
for example, is he a target striker? Is he running in behind? Is he a dribbly kind of guy? What do we know?
He is a dribbly kind of guy who gets a lot of shots and scores a lot of goals. He's not a target man in that he doesn't really get or has not yet gotten on the end of crosses. So that worries you a little bit, given what I was talking about Everton's tactical approach. I'm not sure it means that he can't, but he didn't.
I see.
But he's also quite good with the ball at his feet. He doesn't yet or hasn't yet demonstrated a real range of passing, but he is, sort of from the first touch perspective, from, getting the ball on the half turn and beating somebody off the dribble, he's really, really strong at that. And so, it's a really mouth-watering set of skills, but at 19, you just sort of don't know yet whether those skills will cohere into a cohesive, really good player. But the goal-scoring numbers that he's put up already are the kinds of numbers that superstars tend to put up when they're young. Now, lots of people put up those numbers and then don't become superstars, but it's very rare to find somebody who at 24 looks like a world-beating striker who wasn't scoring like Kean was at 19.
So hopefully Moise Kean is not the new Francis Jeffers or Michael Branch.
Yeah. Yes. I will also say that, like, Everton's past under David Moyes was littered with, the next big thing strikers that turned out to be nothing. So,
maybe it changes the way Everton play a little bit. Maybe Moise Kean comes deeper than Dominic Calvert-Lewin would, because then he can receive the ball and run at people.
It's definitely possible, because what Calvert-Lewin is legitimately good at is being a target man in the air. He's tall and very good at winning aerial battles, and that's like in a way that's unusual for young strikers. And they, Everton, to a certain degree, when they decided and settled on playing Calvert-Lewin, took advantage of that. So it is certainly possible that what you could see is them playing the ball more into Kean's Kean's feet and working from that regard. I mean, the concern that you have, though, is that, I mean, none of the wingers that they have really like to run in behind. Walcott kind of does, but like I think if Walcott is playing a lot, you're sort of in trouble given everything he takes off the table.
Yeah. Not Richarlison. I can imagine Richarlison. I've seen Richarlison get himself in the box a lot.
He loves the ball at his feet. He loves to pull wide onto the wing, get the ball into his feet, and then square up a defender and take them on. Or he loves to get in the box without the ball, right? Like those are the things that he does. But if you're looking for, it's kind of an increasingly rare skill in the modern era for whatever reason, that when you have a defense that plays a high line, that you have these wingers who are looking to make runs in behind rather than receive the ball to feet.
It's weird, right? It's such an old-fashioned thing that used to be really effective.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there are probably sort of, we could spend hours debating the developmental reasons for it or what happened to the game and why that has led this to be the case. I have theories that perhaps we might see it become reborn over the next few years as pressing becomes so prevalent across all the major leagues.
Because there's space to do it.
Right, exactly. But it is just sort of like, if you look at the top teams across Europe and the Premier League, most of them don't have a player that wants to do it. And the ones that do stand out, right? Like Heung-min Son does, and it stands out.
Yeah.
Marcus Rashford does, and it stands out. But most of these players, right? Like the difference at Manchester United between Rashford and Martial is that Martial wants the ball at his feet and is quite good at doing that. And Rashford is happy to run in behind and get the ball that way and is quite good at doing that.
All right. We are breaking into the Everton preview to interrupt Taylor's vacation yet again. Taylor, I apologise, but also hello.
Hello. Island Taylor doesn't mind. He's happy to hear these things. He's happy to hear your voice, Daryl. It's all good.
Island Taylor is so chill.
Well, you haven't talked about Liverpool or Man City yet, which will just make me sad. So right now I'm happy.
Should I not call you for those ads?
No, please don't.
You know I will, right? There's no one else to call.
Nah, it's fine. Call somebody else. It's cool.
Okay, so I was talking to Mike Goodman about Everton. I want to talk to you about cooking. How about that?
Okay. That seems like a good order of operations. Talk to Mike about soccer. Talk to me about food or something.
Mike has one set of expertise. You have another. So today's show is sponsored by HelloFresh, a meal kit delivery service that shops, plans and delivers step-by-step recipes and pre-measured ingredients so you can just cook, eat and enjoy.
That's right. They make conquering the kitchen a reality with deliciously simple recipes, which is always very much appreciated. Because, again, I talked about this the other day, but when you're at the beach, you don't have to think about this stuff. It's so much more pleasant when somebody just says, like, oh, yeah, I think we're ordering pizzas tonight, and you don't have to think about dinner. But you're eating unhealthy. So with HelloFresh, you have everything you need. It's in a bag. You don't have to worry about the ingredients. You can just bring it with you. You cook it. You look like an expert. You look like a foodie as well, because suddenly everyone around you eats pizza. You've made this delicious gourmet meal that features some sort of vegetable and healthy.
So last time we did the HelloFresh ad, we kind of broke the fourth wall of podcasting and talked about the copy. This time I want to do the same. I love the alliteration of the phrase conquering the kitchen. But is it accurate? Do you feel that way once you do a HelloFresh meal?
That I've conquered the kitchen?
Yeah. Are you like, this kitchen is mine now?
I don't feel like I've ever really conquered a room unless I'm like, I did drywall work the other day and I felt like at the end of that, well, I felt fairly conquered by the drywall for a good amount of time. I think at the end I felt slightly conquerous. But no, aside from that, I don't feel like my kitchen has ever been conquered. But I also feel like that's because if you genuinely want to know, which you've asked now, so buckle up. I feel like it's more of a, like, it's more of a symbiotic, like you got to have respect for the things that you're cooking. I love the Gordon Ramsay idea that, like,
we are all one.
Overcooking. Yeah, well, it's like, more like, if you overcook a protein, like that's chances are that's something that died. So you should probably try to do your best to cook it the right way.
Oh, like out of respect for the dead.
Yeah, kind of. And so, I don't necessarily want to think of it as a conquered pork, but more so pork that I appreciate and thus cooked tenderly and lovingly. And that is a good thing with HelloFresh. It help you with very step-by-step instructions. It's very much down to the minute timing. You won't overcook the pork, so then you won't disrespect it, so then you won't feel bad about yourself, and you still conquer the kitchen at the same time.
So I do feel a little bit of that. Maybe conquered the kitchen is a little bit too much of a aggressive phrase, but I do feel a feeling of success after I follow the step-by-step instructions and the thing that I create looks exactly like the picture, because that's not what normally happens, right? And I really think, because I normally either go off script or overcook or do this or that, but having the step-by-step really helps me stay on track and do it right. You know what I'm saying?
I do. I also think that, like, I maybe am a little bit more of a rule follower than you are on things that, like, don't matter. And then when it comes to, like, hey, maybe don't walk out into the street blindly, I'm like, it'll be fine. And you're like, no, maybe follow the rules. But here, I'm not trying to hear you that against your Daryl nature to, like, sit and follow the rules and read the instructions. Like, I'm guessing that when you buy a new piece of equipment, actually, I don't know, are you the person who needs the instruction manual? I don't know what I would say you are.
Usually not, unless I can't figure it out.
Yeah.
Basically, I'll give it a go myself without the instruction manual, and if we run into trouble, then I'll admit defeat and go back to the instruction manual.
And you can do that if you want, or follow these step-by-step recipe cards, and that allows you to have all meals come together in 30 minutes maximum, with fewer than 2 pots and pans, and requiring minimal cleanup. So I guess, like, you can try to figure it out yourself, taking the Daryl route, and then if that doesn't work, you can go to the recipe card, or you can just start with the card and make them easily and simply.
Yeah, I would say follow the card from the start, because once you, like, if it's a new TV, you can't really break it by getting it wrong. But if it's a recipe, if you don't follow the card from the start and you, let's say, overcook the pork, you can't uncook the pork. There's no uncooking machine, right?
There isn't, but I feel like more than one panicky person has Googled that at some point. Like, how do I uncook the turkey on Thanksgiving Day? Oh boy!
If I turn my microwave upside down, can I uncook something?
If Christopher Reeve goes around your microwave in reverse order, that's how it works. It's a really strange recipe, but it tends to work.
Obviously, there are no microwave recipes for HelloFresh. It's about being fresh.
That's where I'd be concerned.
But just a general tip: don't put metal in the science oven. Don't put metal in the science oven.
Dropping references on references on references.
We rewatched it. We rewatched it the other night. It's such a good movie.
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, also a good movie, and that's where
you saw it without me.
Go watch that movie. Did I go without you? Yeah, I thought you'd already seen it.
I haven't. Oh no! I found out Island Taylor's unfaithful.
Well, I'll go see it again because it's real good.
Okay, all right. I'm in for that.
I was going to say this about it. I'm sure I'll of this. It is the type of movie similar to The Shining that I feel like you could probably watch times and notice little things that will help you better understand what's happening.
Yeah.
Not that it's difficult to follow, but just like, I feel like there's a lot of interconnected stuff that he did on purpose. And I'll leave it at that.
Okay, I look forward to seeing it then. I look forward to seeing it. I also look forward to our listeners enjoying $80 off their first month of HelloFresh. And they can get that if they go to hellofresh.com/TSS80 and enter the code TSS80. That's TSS80. And you'll get $80 off your first month of HelloFresh.
TSS80, not an O.
No.
Try that one.
Not 80, 80. Not 80, 80. It's like receiving 8 meals for free, and it's $20 off your first 4 boxes.
Daryl Grove, like desperately trying to keep us on copy point.
We got there.
Keep taking us on tangents.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, HelloFresh, for today's episode, and for, making it easy for Daryl to conquer the kitchen and me feel like I am one with the kitchen.
All right, so we've covered your expertise. Let's get back to Mike Goodman's Everton expertise. Here's the rest of my interview with Mike. Well, speaking of defence, let's talk about the Everton defence. Do you see them starting the season with Michael Keane and Yerry Mina? And if so, are you okay about that?
I think missing Kurt Zouma was good last year, so the fact that his loan ended and Chelsea look like they're going to have him be a part of their squad this year is a loss. I think Yerry Mina has tons of physical skills, and I'm honestly not sure why he didn't play more last season. So I am cautiously optimistic that as a regular he will step in seamlessly. Phil Jagielka also left. He went back to his sort of boyhood club of Sheffield.
Yep. Ashley Williams is gone, right?
He's just gone. I mean, he's. My understanding is that he is currently without contract. I think I don't know if he's officially retired or he's just been retired by World Soccer.
You were 2016. Feels a long time ago now.
Yeah, right. But, he's 34 and Jagielka was 30. Is still 36, just somewhere else. So these guys are, so they are a little thin at center back.
Yeah, who's their choice? Who, if Mina or King go down, who's coming in? Holgate, maybe?
Holgate, I think, is probably supposed to provide depth both at center back and right back. But it's thin. It is unquestionably thin, even if I feel okay with the top two. Also, when you consider that at right back, Seamus Coleman is old and broken down. He's 30, and he's just, by the time he recovered from a truly horrific injury a couple of seasons ago, he moved on beyond sort of the prime of his athletic career, and his athleticism drove a lot of what he did. So I think he'll play a lot, but you worry about him breaking down.
I was confused about I think John Joe Kenny is a right back, right?
He is.
But he's sent out on loan, so I was really confused why he wasn't kept around to be the Seamus Coleman backup.
Yeah, I'm not really sure either. He wasn't impressive last year, but he's quite useful as sort of a warm body or whatever. I mean, they extended Leighton Baines as a season to be the backup for a season to be the backup left back. He's 34.
Yeah.
It confused me as well, unless they plan to sort of add some last minute, depth somehow or other.
At time of recording, there are 46 hours until the transfer window closes.
Yeah, so I don't know. Technically, I guess they still have Matthew Pennington, who's 24 and hasn't really played meaningful minutes for anybody meaningful on the roster. It's another one of these situations where they have all these players, right? Who have at points played for them.
Yeah.
But are just sort of around, and maybe
Kevin Morales, Yannick Bolasie, these guys are still there, right?
They're all under contract, yes. And some of them, like Morales, is gonna not be there. He'll be loaned out or whatever. But who knows? Maybe they view Besic as center back depth. Maybe they view. Actually, I mean, to be fair, it's possible they view Gibamin as figuring prominently in their center back plans. We just don't know that yet.
Could Morgan Schneiderlin play right back in a pinch?
I mean, in a super pinch, but not. Not. I mean, not in anything resembling like anything other than an emergency.
Cuco Martina, is he still there?
He is under contract. I don't know that I would expect it. He was loaned out last season at Feyenoord, I think. Oh, yeah.
But he was loaned out either way, so it's not like he's a key part of the first team.
Right, exactly.
And then final couple of guys I want to ask about who, in terms of they're still around, what's going to happen. Cenk Tosun, who I think they spent £20-30 million on last season, and Oumar Niasse, who I think got a decent contract, right? So, are these guys in the rotation, or are these guys in trouble?
I think Tosun's just going to be there by dint of being there. I think he'll probably he's a guy that you could probably see getting League Cup minutes, whatever.
Yeah.
Niasse was loaned out last season to Cardiff. Has sort of spent a whole bunch of his Everton career on loan all over the place. I don't see a reason why that would change now. Was there somebody else on that list that I'm forgetting?
No, that was it. Just Niasse and Tosun. Here's a question: has Gylfi still got it?
It depends what it is. He's really, really good at kicking the ball. He is. This is a legitimate skill.
That's one of the parts of soccer, right?
Right, yeah. This is a legitimate skill. And he's a pretty decent, almost like a second striker, right? Where he gets into the box, gets on the end of stuff, can score goals. And I don't think any of that is gone, right? I think that's still part of his makeup, and he's still quite good from dead ball situations.
Yes,
always has been. The problem with Sigurdsson is just his passing range is non-existent. That's not fair. He's not a creative player in terms of creating opportunities in open play for his teammates.
That's interesting. I never thought about that.
to the degree that that he has creative numbers, they almost exclusively come from set plays.
Right.
And that is, I mean, that's a big part of why this Everton attack has flowed almost exclusively through the wings, because Gylfi Sigurdsson is if he gets the ball, is either recycling it out wide or shooting.
Yeah.
And then when it goes out wide, right. And then when he goes out wide, he can get into the box. And that's a real sort of like a value added for the team. So the question isn't, has he declined? I think he's still more or less what he's been for the past several seasons, but it's not clear to me that he's the best option for this team if you had somebody who could be a creative contributor in his spot instead of a goal getter.
There's not an obvious replacement there, right? Like maybe it would be Richarlison playing there, or maybe Andre Gomes moving farther forward, but none of those are quite like traditional number 10s.
Quite right. And all of them would be a significant departure from what Silva has done. Like you could envision a world where, say, they transition to a 4-3-3, and where you had either Gumamine or Schneiderlin playing behind Gomes and Delph, right? Or Gomes and Davies, or Delph and Davies.
So this is without Gylfi.
Right, where you would drop Gylfi and you would play three more well-rounded center midfielders, or one defensive midfielder and two more center midfielders, and you had a more sort of interchanging plan to get the ball up the field. And you could see that maybe being a better fit for Everton's personnel, but that's just not how Marco Silva has ever really played.
Did you say that he sometimes went 4-3-3 against stronger opposition? And if so,
yes.
When he does that, is it Gylfi that misses out? Or does Gylfi just drop deeper?
It has been at times where Gylfi misses out. Actually, sometimes they go three. Sometimes what they would do is go three at the back and take Gylfi off and otherwise play the same. Sigurdsson is the guy who can be taken off without sort of changing the game plan, right? Like in a very weird way, it's like you just remove him. Everything else flows the same. You just have one less body getting forward into the box. Right.
So if Pickford's ever sent off, it's probably Sigurdsson's getting subbed for the reserve.
Right. That's right. And it's a real advantage having him, sort of being able to take up good space in the penalty area and create goals for himself. But you do just sort of wonder, as they've spent a year really shuffling around that line, moving Richarlison around. How do we make room for Bernard? How do we make, do we have to bench Walcott because he doesn't do enough? And who can we put over on the right? What if there was a situation where they either dropped Gylfi for a third center midfielder, or, they moved Bernard central and had Richarlison and somebody else on the wing, or whatever they chose to do.
I'd like to talk about Bernard for a second. I find him a really exciting player sometimes, and I wondered what your take on Bernard is. He really has had his moments, right?
Yeah, he does. I mean, his game is a little bit limited. He again, like a lot of these players, he's not good at interchanging. But he is very, very good at getting the ball across the box for other strikers, and he is very, very good at sort of taking players with him as he moves into the box and creating room for Digne down the left flank.
Yeah.
The weaknesses of his game is he doesn't really have a right foot to cut in on, so he's not balanced. He is not particularly a creative passer, so you don't see a lot of the kind of combinations that you're used to seeing with say a left-sided midfielder and a fullback and a center midfielder, where they sort of combine to create space to free somebody down the wing. It's much more that he will get it isolated 1-versus-1 versus a defender and figure out a way to get the ball in. Now, that said, one of Everton's most sort of potent attacking combinations was him standing up high crosses to Richarlison at the back post.
Right.
And that worked really, really well. And Richarlison is great at getting into those positions. And Bernard was really good at getting, at being able to get enough space for himself to put that ball in. So, I mean, I think that, he's one of those players that has such a specific game that you're really balancing all the things he does really well versus all the things that he can't do. So he has to play a specific role in a specific way. But when he does it, I think that he's more than competent at it.
It sounds like this is the this is the way to define Everton. There's a lot of players that are very good at specific things, but have specific weaknesses. And it's about trying to balance all those things and put a team together.
No, that's right. And like to a certain extent, that's what everybody does when you're outside the top six, right? Like everybody figures out, tries to figure out what can we do to sort of like get the right collection of misfit toys that work for us. Some clubs do it, like ideally what you'd want is 3 or 4 or 5 Moise Keans, right? Like guys who the misfit thing about them is that they are young and have not quite achieved their potential yet.
Right.
Because then if they develop into stars, well, now you've got like a real combination of stuff on your hand that can work at a very high level. Everton are starting to do that more, but what you see is still like, oh, we'll take this, We'll take Gomes, who's good at some stuff and is a Barcelona cast off here, and we'll make do with Bernard, who's like short and very left-footed there, and okay, we'll spend way too much money on Gylfi Sigurdsson, but there are these things that he does well.
Yeah. Where does Michael Keane fit into all that? Is he a signing that you as an Everton fan regret, or is he coming into his own? I mean, I'm really interested in his career because I think of him as, unless I've got this wrong, he was at Burnley and he was part of that Sean Dyche system. And there was a question last year over whether maybe the system was making him look good or whether he's actually a good defender. So I'm interested to hear where you stand on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a good defender. I think he is at times a very awkward fit for Everton's system, which can leave him having to run in space a bunch.
Right.
And that's not a thing he's good at, not a thing he had to do at Burnley, right?
Right, yeah.
If he is defending in sort of confined spaces where he doesn't have to turn and sort of face the goal and run back towards his own keeper, where he can step up and challenge crosses, where he can jostle with guys in the box, where he can make sure to not lose his marker in a crowded area. Those are things he's good at. So he is an awkward fit at times for this defensive line, but I don't.
Oh yeah, because you press, so he's up the field, right? Yeah, the space behind him. I remember I've just remembered the video of Josh Sargent nutmegging him in preseason, and Keane had to take him down.
Right, and like it's just like on some level, it's just a little bit unfair to Keane, right? Like because this is not what I signed up for. Because he was right, he was bought under the previous manager as well. So Ronald Koeman. So I don't know. I think Keane is a fine defender. I think if you were sort of making a list of Everton problems, he's fairly far down the list. But it is also true he's sort of an imperfect fit.
Final thing I want to ask you about, and this is sort of to cover all the bases as well, because like I said, there's 45 and a half hours now until the transfer window closes. Are Everton linked with anyone that looks like happening? Is there any big signing or another big signing coming before the end of the season?
Well, Wilfried Zaha still says he expects to go to Everton before the end of the window, which to me is not. Is like everything that I was talking about before about the Everton churn that has been bad about their transfer strategy. Like he's representative of that. There is no doubt to me that Zaha is a very skilled player and he's good at a lot of the things that he does, and he would probably be better than one of Everton's wingers. But you look at the amount of money that Everton have spent on guys in their mid to late 20s who they then have to give huge wages to, who don't have resale value, and you say, okay, well, is doing all of that better than taking, than buying young players who may not contribute as much now but might have more transfer value later, who might not make us 2 points better this season, but have a potential to make us 5 or 6 points better in 2 years? To me, like the gulf in space between like the kind of move that Moise Kean is and the kind of move that Zaha would be is huge.
And maybe one cancels out the other, right? Maybe the Moise Kean signing makes the Zaha transfer less of a priority.
One would hope. That's sort of what I thought happened, and then then there was another news cycle of rumor mongering that the Zaha thing was still possibly on. So I don't know.
Here's my guess: that Everton bring in another centre back on loan to replace Kurt Zuma, just to have an extra guy.
I mean, I think that's a reasonable thing to think might happen, and would be like sort of perfectly appropriate and smart. but it's been
Axel
quiet.
Tuanzebe. There's my guess. Axel
There you go.
Tuanzebe. Yeah.
There you go. That would work. I'd be pretty thrilled and tickled with that. Like that would work for me. But it's been pretty quiet. It's been pretty quiet on the center back front. I think they maybe got caught a little flat-footed. I think they were perhaps surprised that Zuma's actually in Chelsea's plans.
They just thought that he'd be sending him back for another year. They'd be sending him
or
back.
that they would have the opportunity to purchase him, as they've done with a lot of players that they've loaned in, which is like a reasonable strategy.
Yeah.
So.
Is there anything I haven't asked you about that you think is super important to Everton this year?
I mean, there's some off the field stuff. There's the stadium stuff, where it finally looks like plans on the stadium might be.
Yes,
forward.
I've been reading about that. Yeah, so it'd be on the docks, right?
Yes, and it looks gorgeous. Like we've been here before with this sort of the planning and the stuff, but that's the kind of like long-term horizon that you'd like to see, right? Which is like we're looking forward to the future. We want not only to see how good we can be this year, but to see how good we can be in 3 years, and 5 years, and 10 years, 20 years. So that's encouraging and exciting. And you sort of, I think I'm relatively weird as a fan in that I really do sort of like enjoy looking at the long view and the trajectory of a club. And if that is in fact moving forward, if they're moving in the right direction, then that is quite encouraging to me.
Do you worry about, like, say, the Spurs and Arsenal examples? To me, they both denied it, but it seems to me transfer spending dried up when stadium spending started.
I mean, I think it was quite clearly the case for both of them that they did that.
They deny it still, but yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I mean it's not an accident that all of a sudden Spurs are in their new stadium, and the next transfer window, after doing nothing for 2 straight transfer windows, they buy like the prominent midfielder in the world who is on the transfer market in Ndombele. All right, I do worry about that, but at the same time, like, it's untenable. Like, bridging that gap and then having increased revenue to compete with the clubs above you is something you gotta sort of rip the Band-Aid off and do it.
Yeah.
Like, on the one hand, yes, look at what happened with Spurs in terms of a couple of years of not spending a lot. On the other hand, look at what happened to Spurs. They went from a mid-table club to part of the Big Six, right? Like,
Champions League final.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's hard, honestly, to look at a model of a club moving from where Everton are to being competitive on the world stage and do better than what Spurs have done.
Yeah.
There are differences. They're different. Liverpool is not London. The respective histories of the clubs are different. But sort of in general, when you look at how do we, from a big picture standpoint, if we want to be great one day, how does that happen? Like, it's hard to see it without that kind of ambition.
And there's an argument as well that, like, if like a European Super League or similar type thing is coming, there's going to be a weird cutoff date where you've got to be one of the big teams at that point, or you get left behind forever.
That's an interesting point as well. I mean, I've written about this in the past, I think, but I don't know what a Super League will eventually look like, although I suspect there will be one. But yeah, I mean, there's an argument among some fans that are like, well, screw them. If the top teams want to go, we want to be here and be the big fish in a slightly smaller pond.
Yeah.
Which I'm sort of sympathetic to. But yes, if a Super League happens and there is no mobility between the remaining domestic leagues and that Super League, if there's not even like limited pro rel in that situation, then there's an interesting question as to, would you rather be one of the best teams that doesn't make it or one of the worst tems that does and who just gets beaten up on every year because you don't have the resources to compete with the richer teams.
Yeah. Speaking of resources, I didn't really think about this until I started reading some Everton previews in preparation for our talk. Everton essentially have a wealthy owner, right? Which is something I don't think about very often. They do have a benefactor.
They do. They have a lot of money now, honestly, but it's not like sustainable money, right? We have a rich owner and TV money, and that's enough to do stuff. Except the stuff that they're doing doesn't indicate that they have a long-term plan.
Right.
So, you look at the teams that have become successful, they all have rich owners and tons of revenue and sort of a long-term plan. Like, you need it all. You need all three of those things.
They do have a director of football, right?
They do, Marcel Brands, and he's been better than their last director of football. But both
Walsh,
the last,
I want to say, was the last guy?
Steve Walsh, who they hired from Leicester. But the pattern of this, and Paul Riley talks about this in the StatsBomb preview, is that both of the last two directors of football were hired after the manager was hired, which is like completely backwards, right? Like. So I'm it's unclear whether they're just sort of giving a fancy bigger title to a head of scouting or, what is exactly going on in terms of running a club well. But it seems quite clear that the directors of football have not really been empowered to hire a manager in that way, and that Marco Silva, the other signing who I should have mentioned, who there is rumored, is Abdul Decore from Watford, for a lot of money, too much money.
Oh, the central midfielder?
Another central midfielder.
Wow, yeah, but I'm a big fan of his. I think he's the destroyer that maybe could be very useful.
It's possible, but that's also like clearly Marco Silva's guy, right? Like that's the guy that Silva coached. And so if you look at what's going on with signings, like Silva's clearly got input still. There's a lot of questions about, is this team being run as well as it could be, even though they now have money?
Yeah. Oof. Okay, so if people want to read more from Mike Goodman, I assume StatsBomb is you do write there as well as editing there, right?
Yeah, I'm there 1 to 2 times a week. Plus, if you like what I do, you will like the writing of all of the writers who we have going up on the site at StatsBomb.com.
There we go. Because you change all the words to sound like you.
That's right. They're all...
It's what bad editors do, right?
No, I mean, I do want to just plug the guys and girls that write for me, that they are all, writing about data in soccer in a way that makes it abundantly clear that you watch and are invested in sort of the game itself is a tricky thing to do. And I think we do it really well at StatsBomb, and people should check us out if that's the kind of thing that they're into.
Well, I'll tell you what I like about StatsBomb and also about Double Pivot is that it's not just like, here are the stats. It seems to be, I think you do a really good job of marrying the stats with the eye test. You know what I mean? It's like the understanding of the numbers and actually watching the game and just seeing things.
Yeah, that's what we try to do, right? Like, to me, good stats work is going to match up with the eye test a lot, right? And then when it differs, that to me is where it's interesting. Like, that to me is when you bear down and you look at it and you say, okay, what's going on here? So, like, Gylfi Sigurdsson is a great example of this, right? Like, a lot of basic stats have him as or have had him in the past at least, especially at Swansea, as a very good creative player. And then you watch him on the field, and he seems somewhat uninvolved, and, like, there are never these moments where he's playing a great through ball, and you're just sort of like, what's going on here? And so you dig it all apart, and what you find out in the space between is that, he's very good from dead ball situations, and that's where his creative numbers are coming from.
Oh, so a bunch of assists from crosses, basically.
Right. And now you're like, okay, that helps me understand what's going on a lot better.
Yeah.
And, those are the kinds of intuitions we look for.
Yeah, the opposite of that is I happened to see Sky Sports News when Harry Maguire was signing for Manchester United, and they just put up like a list of like clearances, tackles, and interceptions, and just compared him to a bunch of other defenders with no context around sort of the system they were playing in or anything like that.
Part of the benefit of what we get to do with working in words and at a slightly slower pace is that we can focus on adding that context. And it's sort of like this is professionally what I do.
So statsbomb.com. I'll put a link in the show notes if anyone can't spell statsbomb.com. Do you still freelance elsewhere, or you?
Yeah, you can see me from time to time elsewhere on the web, whether that's The Athletic or The Ringer, or occasionally at 538.
Those aren't bad places to be writing.
No, those are pretty good.
Sounds like you know all the right editors.
That is, I've been doing this for long enough that yeah.
All right, Mike, I will close by saying thank you for taking the time to talk to me today. I really appreciate your time. I think we've got nearly an hour on Everton.
All right, I enjoyed it. I hope to be back soon.
All right, and best of luck to Everton Football Club this season.
Thanks. We're probably going to need a little bit of it.